In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a force field or a remote door kind of thing where there's a button or a lever somewhere that activates a door somewhere else. Now, the force field in this, it's kind of going to act like a door, but it's not really a door. Like the player's not going to open it or unlock it. It's just kind of either there or not there. It's active or not active. Now let's take a look at the map that I'm going off of here so you have some visual idea what I'm doing. This is the scenario. We are going to have a science lab, and then there's going to be a containment area. Now, and you can't get from the science lab to the containment area if the force field is up. So in the control room here, there's going to be a lever. Actually, I changed it to a button, but it could be either. And when we push the button here, we are going to turn the force field on and off, which is going to allow or not allow travel between these two areas. So let's go look at that. So again, the force field is sort of a door, but it's not really a door. Like a door would be an object that sits between two rooms and you have to physically manipulate it. We're not going to physically manipulate the force field. We're going to control it from somewhere else. All right. So let's go over to Lantern and see how we're going to do this. Okay. So here we are in Lantern. Here's our project. I can run this, test run. And there's our science lab. This is a science lab with the exit to the south, to the east, a force field, which is on. To the east is a containment area. Okay, so I got a little typo there. Science lab. Okay, now let's also just walk around here. Let's go to the south. You can see here's a control room. There's a button here. Now, I guess to make it pretty, maybe on the button, I could say, I'll give it an initial description. In one of the walls is a large red button. Just so it's described a little prettier to the player. There we go, south. All right, there's a large red button there, and there's a force field here. Let's go change on our force field object. No, our force field is an object in the science lab. Let's change the initial description to the east. Wait, this is the force field. Yeah, let's make it scenery. We can make it scenery. That's probably a good thing to do. So, and then for the control room, we could say a force field which is on. Blocks passage to the. How about to the east is a force field which is on, or something? How about that? Okay, and this is not my writing exercise. This is kind of an on the. This is really more about the mechanics. All right, so now let's run this and see. Okay, so now it says to the east is a force field which is on. To the east, a force field which is on. To the east. Why did that not work? Sorry. This is not my best tutorial. It's not really working out so well. Oh, that's because I'm in the wrong room. I am in the wrong room. That's why. Sorry, science lab. To the east is a force field which is on. Okay. Behind it, is a containment area or something. All right, there we go. That's coming together. Containment area. There we go. All right, now let's check it out. There we go. Okay, we're in the science lab. To the east is a force field which is on. Behind it is a containment area. Awesome. All right, now what we need is a variable. We want a variable that's going to store whether the force field is on or off. So I'm going to make a variable here called force field on, and I guess I'll use Java syntax. Sometimes I use C syntax depending on how I feel. Force field on. There you go. Now, one thing I've seen people do is they'll have an object and a variable with the same name. Lantern will try to prevent you from doing that, but it's probably possible to circumvent that. Don't have objects and variables have the same name. Lantern will get confused. Now, actually, the force field starts on, so let's change that to 1. Variable updated. Awesome. So if I run this now, and I type VARS, vars for variables, it even says it right there. Force field on is 1. All right. So let's go implement the logic for turning the force field on and off. So I'm going to make a function here called push button, push_button, and click add. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself an if-else construct, and I'm going to say if the force field's on, turn it off. If the force field's off, turn it on. So it's going to do one or the other. If tab else. Whoops. It didn't work. All right, else tab. There we go. If the force field is on, is equal to, so we'll say if the force field's on, now we're going to turn it off. Line. I did PR tab there. You hear the force field power down. All right. And now let's turn the force field off. So we're going to take our variable, which was 1, and we're going to set it to 0. So we've turned the force field off. Now the opposite thing that could happen is if the force field is 1, we're going to do this. If the force field's not 1, we're not going to do this. We're going to skip over it and do the next thing. The otherwise, the else. So we'll say you hear the force field power up. And we'll turn the force field on. All right, there's our function. Now we've got a variable here that we're using to indicate the status of the force field. So let me make a sentence now, and I'll say when I push or press the button. I think push and press are both verbs in here. I know they are. Let me go find them. Push, press the button. When I push or press the button, what do I want to do? I want to call my push button function. All right, there we go. So let's look at our verb checks here too. So we have push and press, push, press. Okay, so to push or press something, I have to say what I want to push, and I have to see what I want to push. All right. So let's go south and push button. You hear the force field power down. Push button. You hear the force field power up. All right, so let's look at our variables here. The force field is on. Push button. You hear the force field power down. Now I'm going to type VARS again, vars. Oh, look, the force field's off. So that seems to be working. We can control the force field now from that button. Now, notice, remember when we went to the, was it the lab? The science lab. The description of the science lab changes based on the state of the force field. So let's go make that work, because we don't want the room to say that the force field is on when it's not. So let's go back to our function, and we can say sciencelab.description equals that. So that's if the, which is off. ScienceLab.description, I just hit .d tab is on. All right. So when we push the button and change the status of the force field, we are going to change the description of the room. And notice that if you're having text, it's got to be in double quotes. All right, south, push button. You hear the force field power down. Let's go north. Oh, look, our science lab, it says that the force field's off now, and it is, because our variable is 0, vars. There it is, force field on, is set to 0. Cool. All right, so now there's nothing that actually stops me yet from going east into the lab, right? I can go east into the containment area. There's nothing that's checking, hey, if the force field's up, you shouldn't be able to move. Well, that's where we can use a verb check. So a verb check is something you add to a verb to prevent an action from being carried out. Like if I'm trying to chop down the tree, check that I have the axe, something like that. So it can allow us to put constraints on how a verb is used. So I'm going to make a force field. I'm going to make a function here called check force field and click add. So what do I want to do in this? What I'm going to do is hook this up to the verb going east. I'm going to hook this up to east. So when I go east, I'm going to do the force field check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if I'm in the science lab and the force field's up, don't move. Print an error message and stop. So let's do that. How do we, so I did if tab tab and it expanded, and I'll do PL tab tab expands to player, dot L expands to location, equals science lab, and the double ampersand, shift 7, means and. The force field up is equal to 1. Double equals for comparing. When I'm testing if two things are equal, I use the double equal sign. And is it force field up or force field on? Force field on. All right. Let's go back to the force field on. There we go. If I'm in the science lab and the force field is on, well, I shouldn't be able to move. So let's print a message, PR tab tab. The force field blocks your way. Or how about the force field is up? Exclamation point. And now how do I make this check fail? The function stop. There we go. So what I'm saying here is if the player's in the science lab and the force field's up, I want you to print the force field is up and stop. Now what I need to do is add this verb check onto the verb east. So I'm going to select east and say, hey, when the player tries to go east, I want you to do the force field check. So let's run it now. Okay. The force field is up. Awesome. Let's go south. Push the button. North. East. Hey, we can go into the containment area. Push button. You hear the force field power up. East. The force field is up. There we go. So there's our check. Our check is preventing that verb east from completing and then moving the player, because we're intercepting that command and we're saying, hey, you know what, before you actually move the player, I want you to check some stuff out. And if it doesn't, the conditions aren't right, I want you to stop the player from moving. Now, just one other little thing, it's a little detail that's going to bother me. Let's look at the force field here. The force field, it says the force field is a shimmering curtain of blue light. In our function that controls the force field, let's change the description of the force field. So if the force field is on, well, actually in this case the force field's off. Force field dot description dot D tab tab expands to description. And actually this is the force field off, right? So let's take this and put it here, and I'll say powered down. So we've turned off the force field, and we're going to change the description of the force field to match its state. So yes, we can change the text on objects. Examine the force field. The force field is a shimmering curtain of blue light. Awesome. South. Push the button. Nice. North. The force field is powered down. All right, cool. There it is. There's a force field. So there's two parts to that. There's the function that we're going to wire up to some button or some action that's going to turn that barrier on and off, and that's controlled using a variable. And then we have to add a check. And the check is going to, which will wire up to a direction, is going to say, hey, if that barrier is in place, then I shouldn't move. I shouldn't be allowed to to let the player move. So I'm going to print out some sort of error message and then stop. And force field spelled as one word looks really kind of odd, but I looked it up, but apparently it works. So there it is. There's how to, we used a variable there to control, to maintain or store the status of the force field. We've got a function for changing that status, and then we've got a verb check that takes advantage of that status when we try to move and uses that status to figure out whether the player should be able to move or not. So there you go. There's how to do a remote door or a force field or something like that. You can have all sorts of fun with this. All right, if you need help getting your adventure game going, if that wasn't enough, you need another tutorial, let me know. I love making these things. All right, happy adventuring.